What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've already heard Square Enix say that they're going to work to expand their horizons and work away from some of the console exclusivity they've had recently with Final Fantasy and PlayStation, which seems to involve Microsoft on a more serious level, and apparently Nintendo, because this was brought up over the weekend and they had some interesting comments that seem to lean into Nintendo's next system. We'll go over that, though, here today. Also, we are going to be talking about an interesting new console that seems to pull quite a bit from retro gaming, as well as the Dreamcast, and we're also going to be going over Microsoft and the potential for them to be releasing a couple of Transformers games this year, which is surprising because, well, there's not much time left. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Nintendo Live 2024 that did happen over the weekend. And during this time, we had a slide that was shared by Nintendo during a certain Zelda event. And it went over the current timeline that they would view, I guess, as just official. And we can see it here. Now, this was shared over on Vooks.net. Okay, the Legend of Zelda history. And to be honest, the Zelda timeline thing has always felt like them just trying to work around something they didn't have planned previously. So I know people look at this and go, well, obviously the lore for Zelda, but I don't know, it just has never felt as a lot of continuity to it is what I'll say. It seems a bit odd trying to play some of these games, but nonetheless, the big thing people were looking at is that Nintendo decided to completely separate Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom outside of the previously established, we'll say, timeline. So yes, those are just off on their own. They did indeed just reboot the entire franchise, the series, with Breath of the Wild, which does make sense. If you look at just the gameplay, the open world nature to it, it feels way different from any other Zelda game, and obviously Tears of the Kingdom is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, so they're just kind of off on their own, and I'm curious if this is the start of a new timeline, or if they'll go back to the old one with maybe their next big release, or maybe they just reboot it all over again, but sure, feel free to argue about the Zelda timeline down in the comments. Also, we do have a level 5 event that's planned basically for Tokyo Game Show, at least a few days ahead of it. We can see this over on Gamatsu. This is the level 5 Vision 2024 to the world's children. It's on September 24th, 21 Japan time. I believe that's later at night for Japan, so like early morning, say in the US on the East Coast, but we can see the list of games they have here. We have Inazuma 11 Victory Road, Fantasy Life, that's the girl who steals time, Deca Police, Professor Layton and the New World of Steam, and then just a completely new title. So we could speculate, I guess, a bit on that one leading up to the event. But the one that I'm really interested in at this time is Deca Police. We know that's been delayed already, and I like kind of the vibe of it, sort of the detective police kind of futuristic setting, them of course leaning into just the more traditional RPG kind of gameplay. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on there, but of course a new title. It's interesting to see what level 5 can come up with and maybe where they go with it. Is it a Yokai Watch thing or is it just a brand new IP? So a lot of stuff to keep an eye on there as we go towards Tokyo Game Show. We'll, I'm sure, see more and more events being announced by different companies. Oh, and for Harry Potter fans, there is a new Lego Harry Potter game coming out. Well, technically it's an upgrade of a port from the PS3. So we had this ported from the PS3, Xbox to like the PS4, Xbox One, and now it's getting just an update for the PS5 and the Xbox Series. This over on VGC, where they say the collection combines Lego Harry Potter years 1 through 4 and Lego Harry Potter years 5 through 8, 2 DLC packs that were released for the latter game will also be included. This remaster is developed by Double 11 and enhances graphics and gameplay, 60 FPS, native 4K, haptic feedback, high-resolution shadow maps. This is coming out digitally on October 8th, and if you already have these games in your library, there is some sort of upgrade fee. So it's not a free update technically, so we'll have to look into that, of course, if you are thinking about upgrading your current ones. But if you've also never bought it before, check that one out October 8th. Just seems like it's just going to be a more refined gaming play experience overall with the newer systems. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Square Enix and plans to expand outside of just these mainline Final Fantasy games being on PlayStation, which we know Sony has worked to fund and of course prop them up with development at times, just assisting them going forward, working on the PlayStation 5 hardware. But we have seen them move outside of that with PC ports, as we have Final Fantasy 16 even coming up here in just a few weeks. But we've also seen Square Enix now take a look a bit more seriously at Microsoft with Final Fantasy 14 going to the Xbox. And they've also been asked about Nintendo and their next generation device. We'll start here though first with Xbox, as it appears they have many more plans outside of just Final Fantasy 14, which they seem fairly happy with how it's performed. This was actually taken from an interview with Eurogamer and Naoki Yoshida. They say, with Final Fantasy 14's release on Xbox, Phil Spencer spent a lot of his time and a lot of effort and put in a lot of hard work into making it a reality. So we would like to make the best of that and further deepen the relationship with Xbox gamers moving forward. So now we are moving towards the policy of releasing our games on a multi-platform basis, and we really want as many players as possible to play our titles. With Final Fantasy 14 as the starting point, we do want to release more Square Enix games on Xbox, and there will be more of our titles released on Xbox. So I hope players will look forward to future things to come on the platform. So yeah, I would expect, so think of like the big Final Fantasy games right now. Sure, you can look at obviously Final Fantasy 16, that's going to PC here soon, as I mentioned, but you're probably going to see it go to Xbox, maybe even be announced for Xbox before the end of this year, or maybe it's something that starts off 2025 and then it comes out just a few months later in the first half of next year. But like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, I think that trilogy has to conclude, as Sony most likely has deals in place pretty much for the whole trilogy, and then eventually maybe that'll run up and they can release it, I'm sure, as just a collection of games for other platforms. And trust me, Square Enix will be reselling those games over and over again, I'm sure, for quite a while. But also you have to think of something like Pixel Remaster. I mean, those games should just be on Xbox, and that seems like something that they would be working towards with Microsoft. So that maybe even going into Game Pass, because you can buy them separately. It wouldn't shock me if maybe Microsoft made a deal with them to put one or two of them into Game Pass, and that'd be a really cool thing if they got like 6, and like, here you go, Final Fantasy 6 in there, or 5, something like that, and just like try it out, see what you think. And it'd be a fun addition, I feel like, to have some of that traditional Final Fantasy representation just in that service, people to just download and try. But even beyond that, Final Fantasy 17 surely is in the conceptual phase, and maybe taking a look at where they would want to put this game, as most likely it's not coming out, as we assume, until like next generation. So maybe they're thinking, okay, what's Microsoft going to be doing? What's Sony going to be doing? And is this something that would be a multi-platform release across the board? Because yes, that could still include Nintendo's next generation system, which, why don't we actually take a look at what Yoshida had to say about that. This was an interview with Game Reactor, as they did ask about plans maybe for Final Fantasy 14 to go to Nintendo's platform, saying, "I'm sure that all of the media and our players probably suspecting they really want to have our game released on Nintendo's consoles, but the concept that we have for Final Fantasy 14 is to release our game on as many devices as possible." It's also noted here that Yoshida was smiling quite a bit when discussing Nintendo's plans for the future with their new platform, and yeah, it seems like I would figure Final Fantasy 14, which I feel like would struggle a bit on the current Switch just because of how much development it's had. The file size is massive, and I will say the system requirements have continued to tick up consistently as they have been doing updates on this game. I feel like it would be something they might be planning out for Nintendo's next system, and I think it would make a ton of sense, as they have seen the foothold that the current Switch has gathered, say, in Japan, and Final Fantasy XIV clearly would do really, really well as an MMO, along with the Final Fantasy franchise in that region, as well as worldwide, of course. So yeah, it seems like to me, and probably very obvious to many of you, Square Enix is going to be moving quite a bit of Final Fantasy, at least as much as they can, to Nintendo's next system to take advantage of that earlier on this time, because they really didn't do much at all with that brand, specifically with the newer titles, because they've been mostly wrapped up with Sony, which hasn't really paid off for them, I feel like, as much as they were hoping. So yeah, get ready. Square Enix about to make many moves for Xbox, Nintendo, and yes, still with Sony, of course, becoming much more multi-platform across the board, even throwing PC in there. Next up, let's talk about a new game system that was announced that is taking after the Dreamcast and just retro gaming in general, as well as some more modern titles on PC. And this system is called the Emudeck machine. If you've used Emudeck, you already know it's a good front end and system, really, that you can use on something like your Steam Deck or other PC equivalent platforms that pretty much puts a lot of your emulators together in a nice format and makes it easier to jump between them. It's just a good front end for a lot of your retro games as well as newer titles there. But now it appears they're at least taking a bit of a shot, I guess, at hardware. It's kind of them dipping their toes in the pool to see how it goes for them, because you can see this over on The Verge, and you can kind of tell why I was mentioning Dreamcast, because it looks like a mini Dreamcast. This is the Emudeck machine. It is a crowd-funded project, so I will issue some caution with this one, as they have not reached their goal. So I don't know if I would dive headfirst into this one, just expecting them to meet all of the things they're laying out here, because some of these are quite ambitious. So it is a mini ITX retro gaming PC. It's using mostly off the shelf parts, you can see. Originally they had plans for 2 different SKUs, an EM1 and an EM2. They did issue over on Twitter X saying nobody liked the EM1. We heard you loud and clear, so we've killed it and added a new perk to the campaign, the Emudeck machine DIY kit. That's actually pretty fun, where you can get the shell and all of the accompanying parts to make, say, your own board and your own chipset and everything that you want inside of that system, that housing basically. But if you look at the current specs they have planned out, AMD Ryzen 8600G, that has the Radeon 760M overclocked built into it, 16 gigabytes of DDR5, 512 gigabyte NVMe, and they do have some benchmarks here that they show off, like Hades at more than 200 frames per second, Cyberpunk 2077 at 61 FPS, GTA 5 110, Red Dead Redemption 2 at 42, but obviously, if you look at the emulation side of things, so they have CEMU at 60 frames, PC SX2 at 60 frames, PS3, so that's the RPC S3, or even Xbox 360 being Xenia, 40 to 60 frames, and it's going to be highly dependent on which game you're playing. And then Dolphin, just 60 frames, no problem there. Those game benchmarks, by the way, 1080p, low, FSR balanced when available, so it's not exactly pushing things when it comes to the visual settings, but it's also not like stupid expensive when you look around kind of in the world of PC gaming, and it is a smaller profile device. They have it listed currently with no controller, coming in at $673. There's also an early bird that is like just complete, that at $695. So keep that in mind. It is not funded, and it has listed currently on their Indiegogo page just in the conceptual phase. They do not have a prototype. So again, maybe keep an eye on this, see if it gets there. They're not really sure if they're going to be something they pursue long-term, because they do mention a dock, which it would sit down on it, and I assume just add more graphical power through way of just a GPU there. But this seems more like a fun side thing that Emudeck, the owner, is doing, the creator, just to see how it goes. Just kind of try out in the world of hardware and see if they can make it work, because they are mentioning December as the estimated delivery. That seems incredibly ambitious for something like this. Even if they work to sell 100 of these things and, as they say, assemble them by hand, that's quite a bit to try to tackle all of that just in a month or two after this campaign ends. So I don't know if I would expect it to arrive in December if you decide to jump in here. Probably first half of next year, because let's face it, a lot of these Indiegogo or crowdfunding pages where people attempt something new, generally something goes wrong somewhere in transit trying to get parts, etc. So keep those expectations in check, but something fun, I think, to follow and see how it goes. Next up, let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, because we had a new trailer, which did include a bunch of new details, one of which I was pretty excited to see because I think it adds a nice wrinkle to it, and yeah, it kind of makes it feel a bit more like a traditional Zelda game, top-down specifically, but we can see some of the 5-minute trailer here. And to start off, you do enter tears, or these rifts, around Hyrule to enter what they call the still world, and you can see people are like frozen and floating around, I guess just in time. So you have to, I guess you can see them, and I guess in the overworld, maybe they're normal or something, but it's interesting. Some could even be trapped in there. They have to navigate around. And it does look like you'll have added platforming here, which does include using your echoes. Like you saw Zelda have like a bed that she was able to jump on and then use as a bridge, but that way you can get across large gaps. And there will be bosses you find. These can be beaten in different ways depending on which echoes you use. Maybe some more defensive, some more offensive. You try to just basically rush through the boss. And they do have more traditional dungeons here, which we already saw, but they just showed more here and just reinforced the idea that, yes, this is a more traditional Zelda game, which, for someone like me who, look, I understand the compelling nature of the open world, Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I still like the traditional Zelda game with these dungeons and it being somewhat more linear than the open world nature, right? So it's still fun to have these along with the big open world games. But something that was really cool, Sword Fighter form. This lets you play what I can tell basically as Link, and it lasts for a limited time, so you're not gonna run around this constantly. And after the bar depletes, you have to find energy just sort of found floating around in the world so you can refill the bar and use it again. They also showed off something called automatons, and these basically are machines made at a workshop. They did point out that these are different than echoes, so I'm sure they'll have other functions outside of things that you are copying. And again, all this comes out September 26th, alongside of that Golden Switch Lite system. And I really like what I'm seeing here. I think the rollout of information Nintendo has done for a game that's it's not like the big Zelda game, like, again, Tears of the Kingdom. This is a smaller Zelda game, quote unquote, even though it's gonna sell still millions of copies, but it's clearly not on the same budget or level as Tears of the Kingdom. So I think this kind of marketing rollout is the right way for it, just to show the game off more and more as you go, because what originally started off as something I thought was intriguing with sort of the puzzle mechanics that could play into those echoes, seems like there's just so much more to this game, and it also kind of taking some ideas even from Tears of the Kingdom, where you have different ways into like the underworld part. In this case, you have tears and stuff that go into the still world, so really, really cool stuff to see here, and I'll be picking this one up day one, and I'm sure having a blast going back to that more traditional Zelda formula with a bit of a twist. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Microsoft and the potential for them to release a couple of Transformers games. And now it's kind of like, okay, what exactly are they going to do here? Because there's a lot they can pull from, of course, with Activision Blizzard now being under Microsoft, and we know that's where some of those really, really cool Transformers games are. But we can see this is posted up. This is over on Transformers World 2005. So they quite established, been around for a little while there. We have received some intel stating that Microsoft Studios is working on not just one, but two video game projects, simply codenamed Transformers. While we do not have any information at the moment, both projects seem to be targeting this year for their new release. Now, if you remember back in the day on the 360, there were a ton of Transformers games, but that licensing was kind of spread out, different publishers at times, different developers on them. However, I think just based on the fact that if this is all correct, right, it seems like something that wouldn't be a big brand new Transformers games, because they're saying it's coming out this year. Well, it's September, so I'm kind of wondering if this is part of their backwards compatibility program, or if these would just be remasters, right, that they announce and they release digitally, boom, like a few days later or a week later, something like that, right? And obviously the ones people are going to think of, Transformers War for Cybertron and Transformers Fall of Cybertron. Those would be awesome to bring back remastered or just backwards compatibility with the Xbox Series enhancements, and online play is enabled. That would be incredible. This is a game that's been delisted multiple times now, and it's very difficult to get. I know you can obviously download it, you can pirate it, that kind of thing, but to be able to go out and just buy it and play it is a bit more of a hassle. So because of that, it's just harder to access, and of course that means that online play, even if the servers were up, would probably just not be populated, you wouldn't find many matches. So this is exciting stuff and something to keep an eye on here to see if that's what we have in store for us with some of these Transformers games, or who knows, maybe they go way back in time and get some of the more questionable ones from years before that. But let me know which Transformers games you would like to see come up that maybe Microsoft has in store for us in 2024, even though, yeah, it's September. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, now that September has started, what game released this month are you most excited for? Of course, if it's not listed there, you can drop it in the comments. They only give me 5 selections, guys. So I took a look through some of the comments. I saw like Ace Attorney stuff down there. I saw Bakaru, so I was checking it out. But looking at the list here, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom led the way, and then Astrobot, then Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, Space Marine 2, and then The Plucky Squire. I think right now I'm most excited for Astrobot, and yeah, some of that might be because it's coming out this week, and I'm really excited to check it out. Having a 3D platformer like that from Sony on the PlayStation 5, it does, to me anyway, call back to some of the older days, like the older Sony, you know, back on the PS2, PS3 days somewhat, right before they made the big shift to more over-the-shoulder cinematic stuff. This just looks like, Astrobot just looks like a video game, like the most video game I've seen in a while coming out of Sony. So I'm very excited to dive into it later this week. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Will, who says, John grabbed the wrong trimmer guard this morning. Yeah, it turns out the trimmers that I have got pretty dull, and they did a number on me. But the nice thing about a beard in particular is after that, if you just get a new trimmer and then you just kind of even everything out, after a few days, it sort of fixes itself as it grows in pretty quick. Again, most people with beards, I'm sure, can attest out there. So that's a nice thing, very temporary, and technically it happened like Thursday, so after Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's already kind of working its way back. So not a big deal necessarily, but it made for some fun comments, I'll say, on Friday. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed Friday's Newswave, I'll have it linked here next to me. Or maybe you want to hear about a retro GameStop store that I actually found out was near me and I went ahead and paid a visit to. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.